भगवते वासुदेव ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Chapter 13 Verse 1 Sut uvaच विदुरस्तीर्थयात्रायां मैत्रेयादात्मनो गतिं ज्ञात्वा गादस्तिनापुरं तया वाप्तविवित्सितः
Translation. Sri Suta Goswami said, while traveling on a pilgrimage, Vidura received knowledge of the destination of the self from the great sage Maitreya and then returned to Hastinapura. He became as well versed in the subject as he desired.
Verse 2 यावतः कृतवान् प्रश्नान् शताकौशारवाग्रतः भक्तिर्गोविन्दे तेभ्यश्चोपररामः
After asking various questions and becoming established in the transcendental loving service of Lord Krishna, Vidura retired from putting questions to Maitreya Muni.
Verse 3 and 4 तं बन्धुम् आगतं दृष्ट्वा धर्मपुत्रः सहानुजः धृतराष्ट्रो युयुत्सुश्च सूतः शार्द्वत्पृथा गान्धारी द्रौपदी ब्रह्मन् सुभद्रा चोत्तरा कृपी अन्याश्च जामयः पाण्डोर्ज्ञातयः ससुताः स्त्रियः
When they saw Vidura return to the palace, all the inhabitants, Maharaja Yudhishthira, his younger brothers, Dhritarashtra, Satyaki, Sanjaya, Kripacharya, Kunti, Gandhari, Draupadi, Subhadra, Uttara, Kripi, many other wives of the Kauravas and other ladies with children, all hurried to him in great delight. It so appeared that they had regained their consciousness after a long period.
Verse 5 प्रत्युज्जग्मुः प्रहर्षेण प्राणं तन्व इवागतम् अभिसङ्गम्य विधिवत् परिष्वङ्गभिवादनैः
With great delight, they all approached him as if life had returned to their bodies. They exchanged obeisances and welcomed each other with embraces.
Verse 6 मुमुचुः प्रेम बाष्पौघम् विरहोत्कण्ठ्यकातराः राजातमर्ह्याञ्चक्रे कृतासन् परिग्रहम्
Due to anxieties and long separation, they all cried out of affection. King Yudhishthira then arranged to offer sitting accommodations and a reception.
Verse 7 तं भुक्तवन्तं विश्रान्तम् आसीनं सुखमासने प्रश्रयावन्तो राजा प्राह तेषां च शृण्वताम्
After Vidura ate sumptuously and took sufficient rest, he was comfortably seated. Then the king began to speak to him, and all who were present there listened.
Verse 8 युधिष्ठिरुवाच अपि स्मरत्नो युष्मत्पक्षायासमेधितान् विपद्नाद्विषाग्नज्ञानदे sorry विपद्गानद् विसज्ञादेर्मोचिता यत्समात्कृताः
Maharaja Yudhishthir said, my uncle, do you remember how you always protected us, along with our mother, from all sorts of calamities? Your partiality, like the wings of a bird, saved us from poisoning and arson.
Verse 9. कया वृत्तया वर्तितम् वश्चरद्भिः शितिमण्डलम् तीर्थानि क्षेत्रमुख्यानि सेवितानि हि भूतले.
While traveling on the surface of the earth, how did you maintain your livelihood? At which holy places and pilgrimage sites did you render service?
Verse 10. भवद्विधा भागवतास तीर्थभूताः स्वयं विभो तीर्थीकुर्वन्ति तीर्थानि स्वान्तहस्तेन गदावृता.
My Lord, devotees like your good self are really holy places personified. But you carry the personality of Godhead within your heart. You turn all places into places of pilgrimage.
Verse 11. अपि न हसुहृदस्तात बान्धवाः कृष्णदेवताः दृष्टाः श्रुता वा यद्वः स्वपुर्यां सुखमासते.
My uncle, you have visited Dwarka. In that holy place are our friends and well-wishers, the descendants of Yadu, who are always wrapped in the service of the Lord Krishna. You might have seen them or heard about them. Are they all happily living happily in their abode?
Verse 12. इत्युक्तो धर्मराजेन सर्वं समवर्णयत् यथानुभूतं क्रमशो विना यदुकुलक्षयम्.
Thus, being questioned by Maharaja Yudhishthira, Mahatma Vidura gradually described everything he had personally experienced, except news of the inhalation of the Yadu dynasty.
Verse 13. नन्वप्रियं दुर्विषहं नृणां स्वयमुपस्थितं नावेदयत् स करुणो दुःखितान् द्रष्टुमक्षमः.
Compassionate Mahatma Vidura could not stand to see the Pandavas distressed at any time. Therefore, he did not disclose this unpalatable and unbearable incident because calamities come of their own accord.
Verse 14. कञ्चित् कालम् अथावत्सेत् सत्कृतो देववत्सुखम् भ्रातुर्ज्येष्ठस्य श्रेयस्कृत् सर्वेषां सुखमावहन्.
Thus, Mahatma Vidura, being treated just like a godly person by his kinsmen, remained there for a certain period just to rectify the mentality of his elder brother and in this way bring happiness to all the others.
Verse 15. अबिभ्रदर्यमादण्डं यथावद्घकारिषु यावद्धारशूद्रत्वं शापाद्वर्षतं यमः.
As long as Vidura played the part of a Shudra, being cursed by Manduka Muni, Aryama officiated at the post of Yamaraja to punish those who committed sinful activities.
Verse 16. युधिष्ठिरो लब्धराज्यो दृष्ट्वा पौत्रं कुलन्धरम् भ्रातृभिर्लोकपालाभैर्मुमुदे परया श्रिया.
Having won his kingdom and observed the birth of one grandson, competent to continue the noble tradition of his family, Maharaja Yudhishthir reigned peacefully and enjoyed uncommon opulence in cooperation with his younger brothers, who were all expert administrators to the common people.
Verse 17. Evam graheshu saktanam pramattanam tadihaya atyakramad avijñatah kalah param dustaraha.
Insurmountable time imperceptibly overcomes those who are too much attached to family affairs and are always engrossed in their thoughts. Hare Krishna, please forgive me for my mistake. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the wonderful recitations. Nandrani Mataji, are you here?
I am. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna. Welcome, Mataji.
Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you so
I'll
much.
make you the host now.
Okay, wonderful.
Sorry.
Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So today I've been asked to cover verses 11 to 13. And these particular verses are really about, the conversation that Maharaj Yudhishthira is now having with Vidura. So before I go into the verses, let me just give you a quick summary of what we've been reading up till now. So Vidura, he is now returned to Hastinapur. And why has he returned? Because, of course, we know that he left because he was insulted by Duryodhana. And so he, of course, he was in the autumn of his life, and he felt best to just leave where, away from where he's being insulted. And he went off to search about the knowledge of the self and where the soul goes after death. And he was being, not tutored, but taught by Maitreya Rishi. And so, of course, when Vidura returns, he's welcomed with great delight by the royal residents, and King Yudhishthira begins to inquire from him about his travels and about Krishna and about his associates at Dwarka. Many of us know that when we go traveling, or our friends, other devotees go traveling, some of the questions we will probably ask is, where did you go? Where are the different places you visited on holy pilgrimage? What were your realizations? So this is something that the devotees of the Lord are always doing. They are always thinking about Lord Krishna. They're thinking about his pastimes, his glories, his paraphernalia. And that's what devotees do. Now, if we don't do that, then usually, pardon me, we just run into trouble. Some kind of issues will always come up in material life. So when we are conversing about the Lord and his pastimes and his devotees, we're not entering into a mundane realm, but something that's very deeply, deeply spiritual. So then Vidura is relating everything to King Yudhishthira. But, and this is the really big important thing, the unbearable news about the destruction of the Yadu dynasty, he is unable to tell them actually, something terrible has happened with the Yadu dynasty. And why? Because he's so compassionate. He's not able to tolerate the pain of, to see the Pandavas in pain. So that's really up to verse 13 so far. I mean, the next session will be more about what the title of this chapter is, which is Dhritarashtra Quits Home. And I think before we go into the verses, one of the things I would love you to be thinking about as we are going to be discussing today is about what one does when they're in the autumn of their life. And being in Varnashram Dharma, one should be thinking along the lines of Vidura Maharaj, and also, thinking about what's going to be happening to Dhritarashtra, because he's so attached to his life. The comparison is that when Vidura was insulted by Duryodhana, although Dhritarashtra was very partial to Vidura, Vidura did the right thing and he just left because he knew that his time was, when there's over familiarity, it breeds contempt. And he could see the contemptuous nature of Duryodhana. So he left and began to try to awaken himself for the desire to go back to Godhead. Unfortunately, in this case of Dhritarashtra now returns back to the palace where Maharaj Yudhishthira is the emperor or the king. And despite Bhima killing his sons, particularly his, the sons that were right at the forefront, he's still not getting it that he's got to leave home. So, this is one of the reasons why I suppose Vidura returns, because as an act of love for his brother, he's obviously welcomed back by everyone. You can see that he's very loved, but he's also got a mission. And so we'll sort of go into that in a little bit. So let's go to verse 11. And verse 11 again, my uncle, you must have visited Dwarka. In that holy place, our friends and well-wishers, the descendants of Yadu, who are always wrapped in the service of Lord Krishna, you might have seen them or heard about them. Are they living happily in their abodes? And Prabhupada tells us in the purport that the word Krishna Devata, those are always enwrapped in the service of Lord Krishna, is significant in this verse. And that the Yadavas and the Pandavas, who were always wrapped in the thought of Lord Krishna and his different transcendental activities, were all pure devotees of the Lord, like Vidura. And Srila Prabhupada is telling us here now that Vidura left home in order to devote himself completely to the service of the Lord. But the Pandavas and the Yadavas were always wrapped in the thoughts of Lord Krishna. Thus, there's no difference in their pure devotional service, either remaining at home or leaving at home. The real qualification of a pure devotee is to become wrapped in the thought of Krishna favorably. So this also tells us, that you don't have to leave home, and neither do you have to stay home. What, the higher principle is to be in rapt thought of Lord Krishna favorably. And so Srila Prabhupada also expands now, telling us that Kamsa, Jarasandha, Shishupal, and other demons, they were always in rapt thought of the Lord, but not at the same level of pure devotees. So here, we can see that it's giving us an understanding that Maharaj Yudhishthira is very keen to hear about the Lord, and it's very keen to hear about, the Yadu dynasty, Dwarka, and also Maharaj Vidura. So the question we have to ask ourselves is that when we're engaging with other devotees, what's the quality of our conversation? Is it always centered around, discussing the pastimes and the glories of Lord Krishna? So verse 12, there's no purport to that. I'm just going to sort of summarize through these three verses, and then we'll go more deeply into the discussion of what these three verses mean. So thus being questioned by Maharaj Yudhishthira, Mahatma Vidura gradually described everything he had personally experienced, except the news of the annihilation of the Yadu dynasty. It's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes we would ask the question, but why didn't you tell him, you know? Yudhishthira Maharaj asked, was he not entitled to know that, you know, the Yadavas were destroyed? But, you know, he holds back. And the next verse actually explains why. Compassionate Mahatma Vidura could not stand to see the Pandavas distressed at any time. Therefore, he did not disclose the unpalatable and unbearable incident because calamities come.
કાલે તમને ઓલું લાવી દઈશ ઊન તમને કાલે લાવી દઈશ સુયા તો છે ને તમારા પાસે કે જે ઊન હશે ને એ માપના સુયા લઈ આવીશ
ને જેવી ઊન હોય ને પછી એના જેવા સુયા મળશે.
So according to Niti Shastra, the civic laws, one should not speak unpalatable truth to cause distress to others. Distress comes upon its own way by the laws of nature, so one should not aggravate it by propaganda. For a compassionate soul like Vidura, especially in his dealings of the beloved Pandavas, it was almost impossible to disclose the unpalatable piece of news like the annihilation of the Yadu dynasty. Therefore, he purposely refrained from it. Right, so I have a question for all of you. Do you understand that? And please just, I invite you to write some comments in the chat. Or, you know, make a, you can also add a contribution if you like. Any thoughts about that?
Krishna Mataji, I did not pay attention to the question, sorry.
That's okay, Indulekha Mataji. Thank you for asking again. So my question is that, do we understand why compassionate Maharaj Vidura, he didn't want to see the Pandavas distressed, therefore he did not disclose the unpalatable and unbearable incident because calamities come to their own, you know, out of their own accord.
Yeah, so we know that the Pandavas have suffered a lot, and Vidura had witnessed all the suffering, and then since he came after so long and everybody was so happy, he didn't want to put them in more distress because, as he says, calamity come on his own accord. That means that calamity will come, but he did not want to be the cause of more distress to them. That is out of his love for them. I don't know, this is my answer, Mataji.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
So sometimes people feel it's a moral dilemma that, you know, when someone asks you a question, you should be truthful. And whatever you have to say, according to Bhagavad Gita, is one should be truthful and say it in a pleasing way. But here, you know, Mahatma Vidur purposely refrains from telling them. Obviously, as you quite rightly said, he doesn't want them to experience any more pain. And of course, they've just come out of the Battle of Kurukshetra, haven't they? And, you know, we know that Maharaj Yudhishthira in particular is really, because he's so compassionate, is grieving about the loss of so many people. So I think it just tells you what kind of a person Vidura is, because often, you know, it's just so easy to pipe up and say, oh yes, oh by the way, you know, I ought to tell you this. I know you're not going to like this and it's going to cause you a lot of distress. However, I think you ought to know that Lord Krishna's dynasty, the Yadu dynasty, is no more. Basically, they all got drunk and they killed themselves, you know, they killed each other. But he doesn't want to say that because there's already, he's feeling, you know, Yudhishthira Maharaj is already feeling the destruction within Hastinapur. Now he's got to now tolerate hearing about Lord Krishna's dynasty. And of course, what's going to happen, the same thing again, Arjuna's comments, you know, the women, are they vulnerable, you know, all the things that come with destruction. So a devotee is always kripalu, and they don't want to either engage in discussions of pain. Now, somebody who's got a dark energy, you know, so we would say sometimes it's purposeless. This is what this is telling us. Prabhupada is telling us that one should not aggravate. Distress comes on its own in its own way by the laws of nature. So we should not aggravate it by propaganda. For a compassionate soul, you know, especially his dealings, it was almost impossible for him to disclose that. Now, there's something a bit more deeper here. In our conversations with each other, we have to ask ourselves, by whatever we say and however we interact, have we taken joy away from someone in a conversation like this? And so it tells us how deeply thoughtful and sensitive and careful we have to be, that, you know, which is, it's like weighing up, you know, which is the higher purpose, to take somebody's joy away, or, you know, there's a point or some information I want to share, certainly here in this case of Vidur. So there's a lot actually we can actually learn from just this, you know, these three verses. I suppose I'd like you to, you know, reflect in your own personal lives how, you know, see, this is not just being a compassionate heart, but it's also part of the Niti Shastras. It's civic laws. You know, we have civil laws in society, but these are civic laws within well, the Vedic tradition. So we have those laws to follow by as well. So somebody who is in the mode of goodness, they would be increasing somebody's joy. And this is what Mahatma Vidur wanted to do, because in his conversations with, certainly with Yudhishthira, he's going to be discussing all the different places he went and his engagement with Maitreya Muni. He's going to increase a sense of freedom. He's going to increase a sense of beauty, health, well-being. Whereas sometimes when we engage in very dark or unpalatable conversations, we're preventing others from feeling good and almost taking the joy away. And I suppose the question I would probably even ask myself is, in every conversation, you know, am I able to increase someone's freedom, someone's joy, someone's beauty, someone's well-being? Now, there's a caveat to that, because later on, Vidura isn't going to, you know, in some ways, indirectly, he's doing all of that, but he now becomes like a spiritual teacher to his brother. And in that situation, he, out of unconditional love, he corrects his brother out of care, in terms of wanting to build and encourage and teach his brother, but also he wants his brother to have that connection with Lord Krishna. So we can actually understand what a great soul he was. Now, Maharaj you know, the Maharaj Vidura, he was, I don't know if anyone of you know, I'm sure you know, that he was conceived by Vyasadeva in the womb of a maidservant, Ambika. And she was also the mother of Pandu. Now, Vidura Maharaj is also the incarnation of Yamaraj. And does anybody know why he came down? Why Yamaraj had to come down to earth? Krishnangi
Hare
Mataji?
Krishna
He
Mataji.
was cursed. Yeah, he was cursed.
So tell us a bit more, Krishnangi Mataji.
I'm just trying to remember that. I know he was cursed. That's why he had to
He was
come
cursed
down.
by Manduka Muni. Do you remember
Man-
why? That's right. Do you remember why?
I'm just thinking. It's just gone out of my mind. I remember. I just read about it only a couple of days ago, and I've forgotten it.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yes, Indilaka Mataji, were you going to add something?
Yeah, he was cursed by Manduka Muni because Manduka Muni was meditating in his cottage, and then some thieves, they put their booties in the cottage of Manduka Muni, and then when the police came, they arrested Manduka Muni also because they saw that he was part of the thieves. And then when he went, he was tried by the magistrate, and the magistrate said that he should be given a particular kind of punishment, that he should be put to on a rod, right?
Yeah.
And then when he was put on that rod, his body would not touch it, right? And so they informed the king, who came there, and the king realized that he is a great rishi, and the king asked for forgiveness and let him go. Then he was not satisfied. He said he need to go to Yamaraj to ask why this kind of this particular punishment. And when he went to Yamaraj, then Yamaraj revealed that when he was a child, he used to prick the backside of an ant, and then that's how he had to pay for that, right? That is a sin that he committed. So then he cursed Yamaraj, saying that you are acting like a Sudra because I was a kid, I don't know what I did, and a child, when a child committed a mistake, that they shouldn't pay for it. So then he cursed. That's why Yamaraj had to come as Vidura. But he was very, very intelligent, even though he was the son of a maidservant. He was the prime minister of the Kauravas.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. He lanced as a child, and his argument was, well, I was young, I didn't know any better. You know, why would you want to punish me? So absolutely. And so Vidura was actually, although he was born of a maidservant, he was treated very equally by grandfather Bhishma. And also Dhritarashtra looked after his brother. But of course, in the court, when Duryodhan insulted him, it resulted in Vidura leaving home for pilgrimage and taking instruction from Maitreya. So we can also understand that the great devotees of the Lord also experience challenges. And here in this case, Manduka Muni now curses Yamaraj to become a Sudra, and of course Vidura comes down. So if Vidura is Yamaraj, then of course he is very, very qualified to be a spiritual teacher, because he understands himself, the laws of material nature and the consequences of them. So I want you to think about your own experiences in life where, like Vidura, have you experienced something that was quite painful, that caused you not to physically leave home, but mentally leave, almost sort of detach. And of course, in Vidura's case, it was the very right thing. It was the mercy of the Lord, because it enabled him to engage with the Lord, his form, his pastimes, his glories. So I just want you to sort of meditate on that for a moment. that, we've all gone through those kind of experiences where there may be just one, incident or thought that comes in our life that forces us to think about renunciation. But here Prabhupada also tells us that we don't have to leave home to do it, but it's an act, it's an act of the heart and mind that one can just detach themselves. Okay. So let's look at, what is Srila Prabhupada's mood and mission? What is it that we can learn from this? Well, we learn that to satisfy the Lord, the criteria that one should have is that, we should aspire for the highest perfection of our own life, but to also help others. And in the case of, great souls like Vidura, even Dhritarashtra, Gandhari, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they didn't reveal to their families when they left home. So it also tells us that this is a very, when we're beginning to detach and we're beginning to attach ourselves more and more to the Lord, that it's almost a private process that nobody actually, it's not something that you go out and disclose to others, thank you very much, I'm leaving. They just sort of left in the dead of the night. And, to satisfy the Lord, anything is good, because if it's related to the absolute truth, then, so be it. So that's something interesting for us to be able to pull out from, particularly from this chapter. The other thing that comes out of this chapter that we should be thinking a lot about is I want to come back a little bit to Dhritarashtra, because this chapter is about Dhritarashtra quitting home. And some of the principles we can get from Dhritarashtra is his attachment to household life. Even though Dhritarashtra became a pauper, because remember, his sons had died, he still desired to live comfortably in a house of the Pandavas where Bhima, had killed two of his prominent sons. I always remember my mother saying to me as a child that, obviously I don't know if this is Shastric, but I think the point she was trying to make is that, if you're thinking about your own self, in the case of Dhritarashtra, he was so attached that he would be willing to literally pile the bodies of his dead sons just to go and reach up and get the mango. And I think the point here, that the general principles we will get from this chapter is that, even though he was a pauper, he still was clinging on to wanting to live comfortably at the risk of his humiliation. And Vidura awakens him to acquire a desire to go back to Godhead. And I suppose the question for us is, have we had that awakening yet, or are we waiting for that awakening? But when we're reading this should spur us into thinking, yeah, this is, I have to literally leave, whether it's in my mind or physically, I have to find a way of detaching with family, household life, particularly, if we're going through Vanapras, then this is probably one of the most important chapters that we need to consider. And of course, he was willing to live a degraded life to subsist on the charity of those who tried to kill, insult, and usurp. I mean, he'd actually done that to the the Pandavas, but on this was indirectly that actually what he had done. It was almost like Vidura had to wake him up, like, don't you have any shame? You need to, you can't subsist on the life of charity. You tried to kill these people, you tried to insult them, you tried to take their kingdom and their wealth away, and now he was sitting in their kingdom like nothing has happened. So, the problem with Dhritarashtra is he was unable to estimate the existence of his material body, the wrong conception of life, that he hadn't really, almost over 80% of his life was utilized in trying to make these plans to take over the kingdom. And really, he hadn't put much into self-realization. So, Yamraj or Vidura, he was anxious. Well, Yamraj was eager and anxious to appear as Vidura because he wanted to preach the glories of the Lord. And even though he was cursed by the will of the Lord by Madhaka Muni. So we can also see that when things happen, it's because even if it comes out as a curse, there's always a blessing. One of the things Vidura did, and this is almost like a contradiction. On the one point, Vidura is so compassionate, and he doesn't want to tell, he doesn't want to cause any distress to the Pandavas. He doesn't want to say anything unpalatable or unbearable because calamities come to their own accord. But he does something differently with Dhritarashtra, because with Dhritarashtra, he pulls him up and says, look, he specifically mentions Bhima because, he criticizes that, look, Bhima killed your sons. And what do you think you're doing? You are sitting comfortably at the risk of your own humiliation. Well, he was already being humiliated by Bhima because Bhima was, when he was feeding him, was just throwing his food at him. So he wanted his brother to understand that one can only stabilize oneself in the autumn of their life by, living a life that is not based on profiteering from somebody or self-interest, and to let go of the powerful urge to still exist, but instead he speaks the very harsh truth to enable his brother to now think about using his body to go back to Godhead. And so in this chapter, there's a couple of things that Prabhupada wants us to know about. There are three types of devotees. There are those who are dhira, who are not disturbed by being away from family association. Then there are those who are in renounced order of life, and they're not engaged in the sentiments or anything like that. And then there's the sincere devotee whose God consciousness is awakened by hearing, chanting, And while they live at home, they are still completely dependent on the Lord who resides in one's heart. So for us to go away and think about this, Prabhupada tells us a first-class man awakens his understanding either by himself or others, the falsity and the material and the misery of the material world, and thus leaves home and depends fully on the Supreme Lord who resides within the heart. And for compassion and adhering civil laws, one should not speak or disclose unpalatable truth to cause distress to others, because distress comes on its own accord, not to aggravate by propaganda. So we can see that Vidura wasn't propagating propaganda, certainly with Yudhishthira, but with his brother, he had to kind of shake him out of his complacency. So I think I'm going to stop there. It's 8:30. Does anyone have any comments, anything they'd like to add, anything that they think could enrich this class? Please feel very welcome to unmute and share your realizations, if anything.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, we see that Vidura, he is not only physically blind, he is spiritually blind also. He has never wanted to realize anything in his life. He was like governed by his sons, but whatever Duryodhana was telling him, he was just going towards that. And he never took his responsibility, because if he was a responsible person, he would have kind of taken care of the orphan nephew also. So he was partial to only his son. And also we see that Vidura came back. It's all Krishna's Leela. Krishna wanted to use Vidura, who was Yamraj, as a medium to teach us. Whatever problem we have in life, it doesn't matter if it's bodily pain or it's financial problem, any problem we have, it's just coming partly due to our karma, and also is coming to teach us. Because whatever problem we have in life, it's not a punishment. It's a lesson we have to learn. So that's why Vidura he has come back. He came back just to take his brother, because his brother was like, he thought that he was still the king, that he was still ruling, because he had that mindset that I am the king, I have been ruling, I will continue ruling. So Vidura had to take him away from there. And Vidura was very compassionate. He wanted also to liberate his brother. As Yamraj, he had that kind of knowledge, and he was more enlightened by Maitreya Muni. We know in second and third canto we'll talk about it. So he got enlightened there, and he came back. He was already a very learned person, so he just wanted to liberate his brother. So this is a great lesson for all of us. It doesn't matter. Sometimes, in a family, there are always some problem arising between brothers and siblings and family members. So we should put all these aside, and we help our whoever, even our neighbors, who are our friends, our family members. We try to help them. We have to put all these disparities aside and try to help in any way we can. And Krishna is happy about that. When we help someone, he's very happy. In any way you help anyone, Krishna is very happy. So Vidura was used as a medium to take discharge from the palace, and Krishna realized that he had to leave, and he did the Ashtanga Yoga. In this way, he left the world. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Thank you, Dileka Mataji. So just to close on that, what you've said, you're absolutely right. He was compassionate to his brother. And Narottam Das Thakur says that, a person who is completely relieved of all taints of sinful acts and who can depend alone, only on the Supreme Lord, is, qualified to be at the stage of going back to Godhead. So this is what Vidura wanted for his brother. He wanted Dhritarashtra to be completely free from all the attachments of the house, the kingdom, as you quite rightly said in Mataji, that he was still attached, he was still thinking he's the king, he's still thinking he's part of this great family. And he wanted his brother to leave in the dead of the night and to completely let go and depend completely on the Supreme Lord. So what a wonderful example for us to think about as well, particularly in the autumn of our life. So thank you, everyone. Please accept my humble obeisances or close to Srila Prabhupada. And taking the
Hare
trust of the
Krishna,
universe.
Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you. Please accept my humble obeisances. Always to Sri Guru and Gauranga.
Thank you, Krishna.
Mataji, yeah, there was one good point in here that,
Yeah.
like through the Niti Shastra, like it says that, like sometimes, because sometimes you feel, to speak untruth, you feel bad that, but, like in the Shastra, it also says when you save somebody or you have to certain time, you have to be, to, not put somebody in a difficulty or so then you can be untruthful, but like Niti Shastra said that, like, the truth has to be palatable and, but, like Vidura said, then you avoid it. So not to say untruth, but
Yeah. And I suppose this is, you're absolutely right. However, on this instance, Krishnavali Mataji, it is speaking about the truth, isn't it? But it's like a judgment call. When do I speak the truth? When is it palatable? When is it not? But the higher principle is, if it's going to help somebody to detach and go back to Godhead, then Vidura's, he's cutting, isn't he? Because his words are cutting like a sword. They literally detach, Dhritarashtra. They cut all his attachments to him, which is beautiful. Anyway, Sarishbhai's got a point as well. Did you have anything else to add, Krishnavani?
No, because I said, like, revealing the Dwarka's incident, he, as Yudhishthira Maharaj asked, but he did not reveal it. So there, and also like Yudhishthira Maharaj and Karna, and in the Mahabharata, we also, there are some examples that, sometimes they are just, they're stick to their vows, but then, like Krishna says that if it's going to be harmful, then you have to, let go your vow, but then protect somebody. So, so that's what, but, thank you for, like informing us about the Niti Shastra, that sometimes when you have to be untruthful, then you feel bad within. But, like if you're doing good to somebody and if it's going to help them, then I think it's better to take a chance. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Krishna Mataji. Hare Krishna, Sarishbhai. Please unmute and share.
Hare Krishna and Holy Mataji. Thank you for a wonderful class. So this all hinges on Krishna's instructions on austerity of speech in 1715, where it says austerity of speech consists of speaking words which are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. Those are the instructions, and what are the acharyas tell us is there is a priority to those. And it's important to understand the priority. Truthfulness is actually, ironically, not at the top. At the top is, it has to be beneficial to the person receiving what you're saying. It may be unpalatable. It may be perhaps not the truth, but it has to be for their benefit. So the priority is, it has to be said for their benefit. So as you rightly point out, Vidura executed when it came to Yudhishthira, it wasn't for their benefit to tell them at that point what had happened to the others. but being blunt and to the point. Even though he agitated Dhritarashtra, it was for his benefit. So the priority is what's important in understanding these things. And Krishna gives us the authority of speech, and our acharyas tell us how that should be implemented, which is really important. So that's how to execute on this. It sometimes may not be palatable, but it has to be, where possible, truthful, but more importantly, it has to be beneficial.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. It's a really important point you brought up today. Thank you.
No, thank you, Salish. That was like the icing on the cake, really. That's great. Yeah, thank you so much. It's something for us to go away and read the Bhagavad Gita and just revisit that verse and purport. Okay, please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you so much for your association this evening, and wishing you a wonderful evening. Hare Krishna. Taking the dust of your lotus feet. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandrani, for a very nice class.
Thank you, Nandrani. Wonderful class. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Mataji.
Vanchakalpe
Hare
vanchakalpatatu vyashipa sindhuve vacha patitanaya pamunebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namo.